At the moment she'd laid eyes on Yang Yi, Fong Jin had decided that she would destroy the leader first. Yang Ye's appearance had allowed her to verify the thoughts she had, and it was that Yang Yi was controlling everything from the shadows. As for why the members of the League of Doom had helped Yang Yi, she didn't know the answer, and she only knew that her opportunity had arrived. So long as she was able to take control of Yang Yi, then she could take control of the entire situation. So, she'd intentionally spoken about Fong Yu so that Yang Yi would put down his guard. Sure enough, she'd succeeded. At the instant that the top of her sword had stabbed on Yang Ye's chest, a wisp of a complacent smile couldn't help but appear on the corners of Fong Jin's mouth. However, her smile had frozen in next to no time because she noticed that it felt as if she'd stabbed a piece of heaven-rank iron. Fong Jin was stunned for a moment, and then she completely disregarded her shock, withdrew her sword, and intended to retreat. Meanwhile, Yang Yi had moved forward and instantly arrived in front of her before he directly grabbed a hold of her throat. Fong Jin was shocked, and the profound energy within her body was just about to surge when Yang Ye's right knee suddenly smashed upward against her stomach. Bang! A muffled bang resounded as Fong Jin's eyes opened wide because her dantian had been shattered. "Did you really think I'm that stupid?" Yang Yi said while he held her by the throat. "Even though your acting was very good and even made me think you were a friend of my mother's in the beginning, unfortunately, I, Yang Yi, am not that stupid to actually believe you. Just think about it. Would the Flower Palace dispatch a good friend of my mother's to kill me? Moreover, even though you've been constantly forcing yourself to seem very amiable on the surface, I sense traces of killing intent from you. Perhaps you don't know, but my sword intent is slaughter sword intent." As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Yi didn't care about what she wanted to say, and he exerted a little force with his palm. Crack! Fong Jin's neck was instantly broken. He would have definitely been unable to kill her with such ease if she'd fought him head-on. Unfortunately, she tried to play tricks on him, and that just happened to give him a chance. She was trying to make him lower his guard, yet she didn't realize that he was making her lower her guard as well, and the moment her sword struck him was precisely that moment. Yi Yun and the others who were hiding in the shadows instantly heaved sighs of relief upon seeing Fong Jin die. Earlier, they'd almost charged out from their hiding places. However, they'd suppressed that impulse of theirs out of their confidence in Yang Yi. Sure enough, Yang Yi hadn't disappointed them. At the same time that they heaved sighs of relief, their admiration and respect towards Yang Yi had grown slightly greater as well, because an attack that carried the full strength of a fourth-rank spirit realm expert had actually been unable to harm Yang Yi at all. Moreover, that same expert had been killed with a single counterblow from Yang Yi. Besides that woman and Nanjing, there's probably no one below the Exalt realm who can go against him. Yang Yi was unaware that just this small matter had caused his prestige in their hearts to improve greatly. The other members of the Flower Palace were still stunned on the spot, and they seemed to be unable to accept Fong Jin's death. Fong Jin was a fourth-rank spirit realm expert, but she'd actually been instantly annihilated just like that. It wasn't long before those disciples of the Flower Palace had recovered from their shock, and the first thing they did upon recovering their shock wasn't trying to take revenge on Yang Yi, and it was to flash towards the surroundings instead. Since Yang Yi could annihilate Fong Jin in an instant, then he could do the same to them. Not to mention that the 100-flower formation had been undone because Fong Jin had left it. So, if they were to continue staying there, then the only fate that awaited them was to be assassinated by those terrifying assassins who seemed like ghosts. On the other hand, they would still have a chance at survival if they fled. Once one fled, there was a second, and then the other disciples who'd originally intended to fight desperately to the death had given up on that thought and started to flee as well. Yang Yi shook his head while he watched these disciples of the Flower Palace flee towards the surroundings. He didn't pursue them because there would naturally be someone else to pursue them. If these disciples of the Flower Palace had chosen to continue staying united, then it would be extremely troublesome to kill them. Unfortunately, they just had to choose to split up and flee on their own, so wasn't this equivalent to providing Yi Yun and the others an opportunity to assassinate them? How could these disciples of the Flower Palace go against Yi Yun and the others while beneath the veil of night? It wasn't long before countless shrill cries resounded through the night sky. Your physical body seems to have become much stronger. Meanwhile, a Nanjing had suddenly arrived by Yang Ye's side. At this moment, Yi Yun and the others had gone to pursue those disciples of the Flower Palace. So only Yang Yi and a Nanjing remained here. As for those two assassins at the Exalt realm, Yang Yi didn't know where they'd gone. Yang Yi smiled and was just about to speak when both his and a Nanjing's expressions had changed slightly at the same time. Two black-clothed figures appeared in front of them without making a single sound, and then two pitch-black daggers shot swiftly like bolts of lightning towards their necks. Bang! The dagger in the hand of that black-clothed figure in front of a Nanjing hadn't even arrived in front of her neck when he'd been kicked flying, and then he collided with a large tree before crashing to the ground. This black-clothed figure was horrified in his heart because he noticed that the bones within his entire body seemed to have fallen apart, and he wasn't even able to arouse an ounce of strength. After she kicked that black-clothed figure flying, and Nanjing looked at Yang Yi. At this moment, the battle on Yang Ye's side had come to an end as well. There was a dagger on Yang Ye's neck, but it hadn't even been able to break through his skin. On the other hand, a sword was stuck in the left shoulder of the black-clothed figure in front of him, while blood was ceaselessly flowing down from the wound. And Nanjing glanced at Yang Yi and didn't say anything. His physical body seems to be a little too strong now. What a waste, Yang Yi thought to himself as he gazed at the black-clothed figure in front of him. Because at the instant the assassin had failed. No, it should be said that the assassin had taken his own life when Yang Ye's sword had stabbed his shoulder. Yang Yi withdrew his sword and kicked the black-clothed figure away. He didn't look at the other black-clothed figure because a Nanjing wouldn't be standing here if that assassin hadn't taken his own life as well. These are the assassins of the so-called League of Doom? And Nanjing glanced at the corpse of the assassin in front of Yang Yi and said, "Their movement technique isn't bad, but their strengths are too inferior. They aren't just a little bit weaker when compared to the assassins of the Yin clan. Their strengths are already very good in the southern territory." Yang Yi said, "Moreover, it isn't that they are weak, and it's actually because we're too strong. Or perhaps it was because they underestimated their enemies. They felt that we were only ordinary spirit realm profounders, so they didn't use their full strength." And Nanjing shook her head and said, "You should feel fortunate because you haven't seen a true assassin. Even though these assassins by your side aren't bad, they are truly too inferior when compared to those assassins of the Yin clan." Yang Yi believed in Nanjing because she disdained to lie. Besides that, he'd personally witnessed the strength of that black-clothed woman by Enbiru's side. She was even able to instantly assassinate a monarch realm expert, so how could she possibly be weak? Moreover, these two Exalt realm assassins by his side had addressed the woman as master. So, in other words, it was very likely that the assassins of the Yin clan were fostered by her. How could the assassins fostered by such a terrifying assassin be weak? I'm really curious. Exactly what is the relationship between you and the Southern and clans, madam? And Yang Yi suddenly asked this question, and he'd been wanting to ask her about it for a long time. "It's none of your business." And Nanjing glanced indifferently at Yang Yi before she turned around and left. Yang Yi rubbed his nose, and then he shook his head and smiled. It's still quite difficult to get along with her. However, he didn't mind at all, and it was fine as long as she was strong. Even though that black-clothed figure had tried to assassinate him just now, he'd been constantly paying attention to a Nanjing, and he'd noticed that her strength seemed to have improved again. No, to be more precise, it seemed like a Nanjing's strength was improving incessantly every single day. She really is a huge source of pressure. Yang Yi took a deep breath. Needless to say, it felt quite good to have such a formidable opponent. Because such an opponent would motivate him incessantly and make him feel pressured at all times, and then he would urgently desire to become stronger and stronger at all times. At this moment, he really looked forward to the battle between him and a Nanjing. A black shadow flashed, and then Yi Yun appeared in front of Yang Yi. Yi Yun was stunned when he saw the corpses on the ground, and then he said, "Sword Master? They attacked you?" Yang Yi nodded and said, "How is it on your side?" Yi Yun suppressed the shock in his heart and answered, "They'd been practically annihilated. The remaining few are quite fast, but it isn't a problem because our brothers are already in pursuit." I believe it won't be long before our brothers will return with their heads. Sure enough, a few black-clothed figures flashed over from afar and arrived in front of Yang Yi. One of them said to Yang Yi with excitement, "Sword Master, I killed a spirit realm profounder. Look, this is that profounder's head." As he spoke, he displayed a bloody head to Yang Yi. Yang Yi smiled as he gazed at the young man. Yang Yi knew this young man. His name was Qingshan and he was a king realm profounder. The reason the young man was so happy was mainly because surmounting one's cultivation to assassinate a profounder at a higher realm of cultivation represented a form of glory amongst all of them. After all, less than 10 of the 100-plus assassins that made up their group were able to accomplish that. Yang Yi stretched out his hand to pat the young man on the shoulder, and then he flipped his palm. 5 top-grade energy stones and 10 top-grade Strider talismans appeared in his hand as he said, "This is your reward." The others immediately revealed expressions of envy when they witnessed this scene, because such a reward was truly too tempting. After all, they might have been unable to earn even a single top-grade energy stone after completing a year of missions in the past. Yet now, they could obtain such generous rewards for just surmounting their realm of cultivation to kill a profounder who was at a higher realm of cultivation. At this moment, all of them urgently desired to look for a spirit realm expert to transform into their target. Qingshan stored his rewards with slight excitement, and then he said, "Thank you, Sword Master." Yang Yi nodded. He was just about to speak when those 2 black-clothed women and Bairu sent along with him had suddenly appeared in front of him. One of them spoke in a low voice. "If you don't want your companions to die, then ask them to leave this place swiftly. There are 3 Exalt Realm experts rushing over here right now." The hearts of Yang Yi and the others immediately sank when they heard this. "Everyone retreat and conceal yourselves. Don't allow yourselves to be discovered." Yang Yi made a prompt decision, because an Exalt Realm expert wasn't someone that Yi Yun and the others could go against. They nodded, and then their figures flashed and vanished beneath the night sky. "Seniors, what ranks of cultivation are those 3 Exalt Realm experts at?" asked Yang Yi. The woman on the left, Qing, was about to answer him when the woman on the right, Hong, spoke coldly before she could. "We can't tell you that." Yang Yi frowned, and then his gaze gradually turned cold as he gazed at them. After a short while, he suppressed the rage in his heart and said, "I can take the reason both of you didn't help earlier as being uninterested in enemies at the spirit realm. But now, Exalt Realm experts have appeared, yet you still refuse to lend a hand. But not only do you refuse to help, you even refuse to reveal information related to them. So, is there any point in having the 2 of you by my side?" In the beginning, he was rather happy when he had 2 Exalt Realm experts by his side. But all along the way, the 2 of them hadn't had any intention to help him at all. Moreover, he had a feeling that they were slightly hostile towards him, especially the woman called Hong. "The orders we received was to protect you. So, we won't lend a hand unless your life is in danger." Hong spoke in a cold voice. "All right." Yang Yi nodded and said, "Since it's like that, then both of you can return to Ancient Domain City. I don't need your protection." Yang Yi wasn't being impulsive, and it was actually because he truly couldn't bear the sight of them. Exalt Realm experts and especially Exalt Realm assassins were a huge help indeed, but what was the point of keeping them by his side if they refused to do anything for him? Since they refused to cooperate, then they could just fuck off. Hong and Qing were stunned. Obviously, they hadn't expected that Yang Yi would speak such words. After all, Yang Yi was in a very bad situation right now. He actually dares to make 2 Exalt Realm assassins like us leave while he's in such a situation? Is he all right in the head? And Nanjing nodded while she revealed an expression of praise. Indeed, the strong really shouldn't rely on others. Truthfully speaking, I've wanted to fight an Exalt Realm expert for a long time. Yang Yi rolled his eyes. She really is mad for battle. If these 2 women weren't too proud and refused to help at all, then how could I have possibly asked them to leave? What do you mean by that? Hong's voice had become cold. Nothing at all. Yang Yi said, I just don't need your protection, so you can return to Ancient Domain City right now. You're courting death. said Hong in a low voice. Xianxia said indifferently, "That's my problem." Hong's eyes narrowed slightly and flickered with a cold glow. At this moment, Xianxia suddenly said, "Even though I'm slightly discontent with the two of you, you're still one of her own. So I don't want to become enemies with the two of you. So, let's part peacefully, all right?" Actually, he didn't have a really bad impression of them, and he was just irritated because they refused to help him at all. So, since they couldn't work together, it was best to part ways and avoid arousing displeasure towards each other. "You'll regret this." Hong glanced coldly at Xianxia, and then she led Qing away. Xianxia grinned, and then he gazed at a Nanjing and said, "We're practically matchless in the spirit realm. Since it's like that, why don't we fight Exalt Realm experts instead? That's for the best." And Nanjing spoke flatly. Xianxia grinned while his eyes were filled with battle intent as well. Only by being constantly in battle could one surpass one's limits incessantly. He wasn't confident in his ability to defeat an Exalt Realm expert, but he wanted to give it a try. Moreover, he wanted to see exactly how great the gap between him and an Exalt Realm expert was. Xianxia and a Nanjing left the spot they were at. Even though they had the courage to fight Exalt Realm experts, they weren't idiots. There were 3 Exalt Realm experts amongst the enemy. Even if one of them was the Martial God and the other was the Sword Emperor, they still didn't have the ability to fight a 2-on-3 battle. After all, experts of the Exalt Realm were part of the upper levels of the entire continent. They were extraordinary existences even in the Central Territory. When Xianxia and a Nanjing had just left the spot, Qing and Hong had appeared here once more. "Big sister, they actually really intend to challenge Exalt Realm experts. Could it be that they don't know how terrifying such experts are? After all, Exalt Realm experts have touched the profundities of space and are able to utilize some space-related techniques. Moreover, the physical bodies of Exalt Realm experts are practically at a state where it's extremely difficult to harm them. They are courting death." Hong spoke in a low voice. As Exalt Realm experts, they naturally knew how terrifying Exalt Realm experts were. It was undoubtedly a dream for a Spirit Realm expert to surmount a realm of cultivation and fight an Exalt Realm expert. Because the gap between these realms could really be described as being like the gap between the heavens and the earth. If Xianxia and a Nanjing were at the peak of the Spirit Realm, then Qing and Hong might believe the two of them possessed the strength to go against Exalt Realm experts. However, what were their current realms of cultivation? One was at the first rank of the Spirit Realm, while the other was at the second rank. Qing suddenly said, "Big sister, are we really going back to Ancient Domain City?" Hong shook her head. She naturally didn't dare to act in such a way. After all, it was an order that Anbiru herself had given. She knew that Madame Anne's intentions were probably to make them help Xianxia. However, she couldn't figure out why their madam would order the two of them to help a spirit realm profounder. His natural talent isn't bad, and he's even the first on the Hidden Dragon rankings. But even then, he isn't worthy of making us sisters become his bodyguard. She'd felt quite uncomfortable in her heart when she received this mission. So she'd been only watching coldly from the side all along the way and hadn't lent a hand. But she hadn't expected that while she didn't like Xianxia, Xianxia didn't like her as well, and this made her even more displeased. A short while later, Hong said in a low voice, "Let's wait and see. He'll regret his decision once he fights with that Exalt Realm expert. At that time, I'll make him beg us to stay." Qing was just about to say something when she suddenly frowned, and then she gazed towards the distance and said, "Big sister, the 3 of them are here. Let's go." Their figures flashed and vanished beneath the night sky. Around an eighth of an hour later, 3 beautiful women arrived at the spot that Xianxia and the others had been standing at earlier, and their faces immediately turned gloomy when they saw the corpses that covered the ground. "Senior Sister Fong Lee, we're too late." A woman with an oval-shaped face spoke in a heavy voice to the woman in the lead. The woman called Fong Lee had a gloomy expression as she walked towards the corpses of those disciples from the Flower Palace. When she noticed that all of them had died from a single slit of the throat, Fong Lee was sure that it was the League of Doom's work because this was how their assassins usually killed. She immediately said in a cold voice, "The League of Doom? You actually dared to openly attack disciples of my Flower Palace?" This enmity is irreconcilable. Fong Dai, notify the palace that we're confirmed it was the League of Doom's doing. Ask the palace to drench a few outposts of the League of Doom with blood. The woman called Fong Dai nodded, and then she withdrew a high-grade transmission talisman and notified the Flower Palace. Senior sister, I think that there's something strange about this. Meanwhile, the other woman spoke in a low voice. Fong Lee frowned and said, Fong Xiao, what's strange about it? Fong Jin had already notified us that it was the League of Doom that attacked them. Now, even you've seen it. If it wasn't the League of Doom, then who could have killed them without making a sound? Just look at them, they were either killed with a single strike to the throat or heart. Isn't that the usual method that the League of Doom utilizes to kill? But senior sister, have you considered how our Flower Palace and the League of Doom has always stayed out of each other's business? Why would they act against our disciples? Why would they act against our Flower Palace? Asked Fong Xiao. Fong Lee thought for a moment and felt that her words made sense. Right at this moment, Fong Dai suddenly said, Look over there. The two of them looked over and saw that two corpses were lying there, and those corpses were covered by black robes, causing their appearances to be hidden. The three of them flashed over and arrived before the corpses, and then Fong Lee waved her right hand. A strand of strange wind blew over and instantly blasted apart the black cloth that covered the corpse's face to reveal its appearance. They didn't recognize the person, but it wasn't long before the daggers and command tokens on the waist of those corpses had instantly drew their attention. Fong Lee immediately laughed coldly upon noticing this and said, Fong Xiao, you have nothing to say now, right? Fong Xiao wanted to say something, but she immediately sighed in her heart upon noticing Fong Lee's expression. She shook her head and didn't speak again. She was clearly aware of how stubborn this senior sister of hers was, and so long as her senior sister firmly believed something, then her senior sister would persist on it until the end. Moreover, she would persist on it even if she knew that it was wrong. So, Fong Xiao didn't say anything. Fong Lee glanced coldly towards the surroundings and said, It wasn't long since they died. In other words, the members of the League of Doom are still hidden in the surroundings. Let's split up to search for them. Kill any members of the League of Doom that you see. Fong Dai suddenly said, What about Xianxia? He's just an ant at the spirit realm. Fong Lee laughed coldly and said, How difficult could it be to kill him? Just ignore him for now and let him live for a few more days. It wouldn't be too late to deal with him once we're done with the League of Doom. Fong Dai and Fong Xiao, and then both their figures flashed towards different directions. After they left, Fong Lee's figure vanished on the spot as well. Right after the three of them left, a wave of energy fluctuation suddenly arose from a large tree that was around 600 m away from them, and then a black-robed man walked out slowly from behind that tree. He flipped his right hand and a high-grade transmission talisman appeared in his palm, and then he exerted a little force to crush it before he said, The Flower Palace has dispatched 3 Exalt Realm experts. For some unknown reason, they've attacked our forces. Lung Lu and Lung Yi are both dead, and the assassination was a failure. Please provide further instructions. After he sent the transmission, his figure shook lightly and vanished on the spot. For hours later, the sky had turned bright. Fong Lee's divine sense swept out in midair as she searched incessantly. Suddenly, her pupils constricted, and then her figure flashed swiftly towards an open area on the ground below her, and she descended on the ground after a mere breath of time. I've been waiting for you. Xianxia stood just a little over 30 m in front of Fong Lee, and he turned around while a wisp of a smile arose on the corners of his mouth. Xianxia's hands had become a pair of dragon claws, and he held the extremely hard dragonbone sword in his claw. Xianxia gazed at Fong Lee with a faint smile on his face while a glow of excitement flickered in the depths of his eyes. How could he not feel excited when he was about to fight an Exalt Realm expert? In the past, Exalt Realm experts were far beyond his reach, and they were existences that he had to look up to, because Exalt Realm experts were practically the top experts of the Southern Territory. After all, the Monarch Realm experts in the Southern Territory mostly consisted of old geezers who lived in seclusion, and they practically never showed themselves to the world. So, when Monarch Realm experts remained in seclusion, the Exalt Realm experts were matchless existences. Now, Xianxia was about to fight such an expert which he had to look up to in the past. He felt no fear or awe, and all he did feel was excitement and happiness. "You're Xianxia," Fong Lee spoke in a low voice. At the same time, her divine sense swept out to search the surroundings, because it was clear to her that Xianxia had been waiting for her. However, Xianxia was merely a spirit realm expert. So, since he dared to wait here for her without a shred of fear, then she believed that Xianxia definitely possessed some sort of trump card or had set up an ambush. Right at this moment, Xianxia suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground. He relied on the enormous counterforce and the rapid shift technique inscribed within the dragon shoes to vanish on the spot. He left a seemingly real afterimage behind while his figure had torn through the air and caused a sonic boom as he instantly arrived in front of Fong Lee. Slaughter Sword Intent sprayed out without being held back at all, and Dragonbone carried a strand of violet light as it instantly stabbed towards Fong Lee's chest. Xianxia naturally had no interest in talking with her before the battle. After all, was there anything to say between them? Today, only one of them would be walking away alive, and since it was like that, then what was the point of wasting his breath? It was best to just attack. Xianxia had immediately utilized his full strength when he attacked because he didn't dare act carelessly at all while facing an Exalt Realm expert. Fong Lee's face fell when she saw that he'd actually launched an attack against her, and then she laughed coldly and said, "An ant like your dares." Eh? Slaughter Sword Intent? 7th level Slaughter Sword Intent? Good speed. Good sword intent. But that's all. Xianxia's speed was extremely swift, and it was swift to his limits, but it was still quite slow in Fong Lee's eyes. Because Exalt Realm experts had a slight grasp of space-related techniques. Moreover, she'd seen even swifter existences, so she'd gotten accustomed to such speed. Thus, Xianxia's speed seemed quite slow in her eyes. At this moment, the gap between their cultivations was clearly revealed. Even though she'd clearly noticed the trajectory of Xianxia's sword, Fong Lee hadn't chosen to go head-on against it because even she didn't dare disregard a sword that carried 7th level Slaughter Sword Intent. Fong Lee's figure suddenly dodged to the side when the tip of Xianxia's sword was about to reach her chest, and she'd barely avoided his attack. She was just about to seize this opportunity to attack, but Xianxia's sword's trajectory had suddenly changed right at the moment she'd avoided it, and it swept towards the right in an extremely natural manner. This sudden change in the trajectory of his sword wasn't stiff or disharmonious at all, and it was extremely natural. It was like he knew that Fong Lee would dodge to that side. Fong Lee's expression had finally changed. Even though Xianxia had merely changed the trajectory of his sword, she was very clearly aware of what it meant. After all, it was very difficult to change the trajectory of a strike that was already completed. It was like a person that was dashing forward madly. Was it possible for that person to suddenly turn around? Swish! Xianxia's sword was accompanied by a sharp whistle as it directly passed through Fong Lee's body. However, it had merely passed through an after-image. Xianxia's expression didn't change at all when this happened, because he felt that she wouldn't be worthy of being an Exalt Realm expert if he was able to injure her with such ease. After his first attack missed, Xianxia didn't hesitate at all to spin his wrist as swiftly stabbed behind him. Clang! The ear-piercing sound of metal colliding resounded. Xianxia's claws felt numb while the enormous force that came from Dragonbone caused him to move a few steps forward. He just stopped moving when Fong Lee's figure had appeared in front of him, and then his pupils constricted because he noticed that it was like an invisible barrier had appeared around him and enveloped him within it. It caused him to be unable to move at all. This is a spatial cage, and it can only be utilized at the Exalt Realm. Those that haven't comprehended the profundities of space are unable to break through it, and this is the gap between the Exalt Realm and Spirit Realm. Understand? Fong Lee's ridiculing voice suddenly resounded by his ears, and then a sword stabbed towards his chest. At the instant that her sword had just touched his chest, the ridicule on the corners of her mouth had stiffened while Xianxia laughed coldly. "I understand now." Bang! As soon as he finished speaking, a strand of flames surged out explosively from within him, and then it swept towards the surroundings. The flames seemed to have been obstructed as it swept out, Yet it merely stopped for an instant before a light explosion resounded. It was like something had been blasted apart, and then the flames instantly swept towards the surroundings. In just an instant, an area of 30 m around Xianxia had been enveloped by the flames. On the other hand, Fong Lee was over 40 m away, and her eyes instantly revealed a savage glow when she noticed that a corner of her flowery dress had been burnt off. She was a dignified first-rank Exalt Realm expert, yet she'd actually almost been injured by an ant at the first rank of the Spirit Realm. What an utter humiliation! How would I possibly be able to hold my head up high in the Southern Territory if news of this spreads? The rage in her eyes died down slightly when she raised her head and looked at the flames, and then it turned into a slightly heavy expression instead. With her experience and knowledge, she'd naturally been able to discern that those flames were no ordinary flames, and they should be a natural treasure of legend. When she thought of the words natural treasure, a trace of greed arose in her eyes. Right at this moment, the flames suddenly retracted backward. In next to no time, they transformed into a small ball of flames that floated in front of Xianxia. At this moment, Xianxia had a solemn expression on his face as well. If it wasn't for his physical defense and the nether ghost flame, then he would be dead now. The gap between the Exalt Realm and Spirit Realm is truly like the gap between the heavens and the earth. You've truly surprised me. Fong Lee's eyes narrowed slightly. Even though you're merely at the Spirit Realm, your physical body is comparable to an Exalt Realm dark beast, and you even possess a natural treasure of legend. Moreover, you've comprehended slaughter sword intent. There's no one amongst the Spirit Realm profounders of the Southern Territory who can match your strength. However, don't even think that you can challenge and exalt. Fong Lee didn't continue because Xianxia had already arrived in front of her. Xianxia really hated it when people mouthed off during battle. After all, they were in a life and death battle, so what was the point of saying all of that? He would definitely start talking if it could improve his strength, but the problem was that it couldn't. Since it couldn't, then what was the point of it? In Xiangxia's opinion, it was useless. So, he directly attacked because attacking was meaningful to him. Fong Lee's face fell because Xiangxia's actions were undoubtedly a form of disregard. Not a single person in the world liked the feeling of being disregarded, and Fong Lee was no exception. She was truly infuriated this time. Since you want to die, then I'll fulfill your wish. Fong Lee had just finished speaking when she suddenly noticed to her astonishment that a pair of enormous wings had swiftly appeared behind Xiangxia's back, and then Xianxia vanished on the spot. An indescribable feeling of danger suddenly surged into Fong Lee's heart, and she instinctively dodged to the side. However, it was still a little late, and a sword that was covered in flames flashed past her left shoulder and caused a strand of blood to instantly spray from it. Xianxia stopped moving and didn't follow up with another attack while he shook his head with regret. He'd utilized the 9th Hell Cold Gale to launch a surprise attack against her, yet he'd still been unable to kill her. As expected of an Exalt Realm expert, Fong Lee's expression was unsightly to the extreme. She hadn't expected that she would actually be injured by an ant at the Spirit Realm. A dignified Exalt Realm expert like her had actually been injured by a Spirit Realm profounder. It was an utter humiliation. She could already imagine how outsider or her rivals in the Flower Palace would taunt, ridicule, and even humiliate her if they found out about this. Fong Lee's expression gradually became ferocious. However, she didn't allow her rage to overcome her senses. She shot her gaze towards the pair of wings on Xiangxia's back, and dense shock appeared in her eyes as she said, "Two natural treasures. 2 natural treasures. How could this be possible? How could you possibly possess 2 natural treasures?" She'd never heard of anyone within the Southern Territory possessing such a divine treasure of legend, and she'd merely read about it in the records of her sect. Yet now, she hadn't just laid eyes upon a natural treasure, she'd even seen 2 at the same time. A single person actually possessed 2 natural treasures, and it was even in the possession of a Spirit Realm profounder. Would anyone even believe it if they heard about it? Xianxia didn't answer her, of course. He issued a command in his heart, and 200 swords shot into the sky while emanating a violet glow, and then they shot rapidly towards Fong Lee. At the same time, the 9th Hell Sword wings behind Xiangxia's back flapped swiftly, and he left a string of afterimages behind as he instantly arrived in front of Fong Lee. After that, the nether ghost flame suddenly erupted and swept swiftly towards the surroundings with a shocking impetus. Fong Yi's pupils constricted. She didn't dare act carelessly at all, and she immediately moved her right hand forward and clenched it as she suddenly shouted, "Spatial cage!" As soon as she finished speaking, Xianxia's sword formation and the nether ghost flame had stopped in midair as if they'd been trapped by something. A wisp of ridicule arose on the corners of her mouth when she saw this. Exalt Realm experts didn't have to utilize any shocking combat techniques or abilities when facing Spirit Realm Profounders because just a spatial cage would be sufficient to render a Spirit Realm Profounder helpless. Xiangyi was an exception to this rule. However, she felt that it was impossible for even Xiangyi to break through this spatial cage of hers because she'd executed it in a serious manner this time and not casually like she had done before. This time, the spatial cage she created was at least 10 times stronger than the last one. So, unless Xiangyi had attained the Exalt realm, otherwise, it was absolutely impossible for him to break through the barriers of her spatial cage. At this moment, Xiangyi's furious shout suddenly resounded through the surroundings. Sword domain! As soon as Xiangyi spoke, an indescribable and strange energy surged into appearance in an area of 30 m around Xiangyi and Fong Lee. Along with the appearance of this energy, the spatial cage Fong Lee created had been instantly destroyed, and the swords and nether ghost flame which had been trapped by Fong Lee earlier carried terrifying strength as they instantly arrived before her. However, an invisible barrier suddenly appeared around Fong Lee when they were just about to come into contact with her, and it obstructed the swords and the nether ghost flame again. At this moment, Fong Lee was surprised and astounded. She was surprised because Xiangyi had actually comprehended the sword domain of legend. My God, it's the sword domain. After all, throughout the history of the Southern Territory, only the Sword Sect's founding ancestor had comprehended it. Yet now, this fellow Xiangyi, who was only around 20 years of age, had actually comprehended it as well. If it hadn't occurred right before her eyes, then she would never believe that such a thing was true. She is astounded because if she hadn't executed another ability unique to Exalt Realm Expert's spatial barrier, then she would probably be dead now. Even though Fong Lee hated Xiangyi, she had no choice but to admit that this fellow who was only a Spirit Realm Profounder really possessed the strength to kill an Exalt Realm Expert. Xiangyi frowned when he saw that he was still unable to kill Fong Lee even after utilizing the sword domain to boost the sword formation and nether ghost flame. However, he quickly came to an understanding in his heart. If Exalt Realm experts were so easily killed, then they wouldn't be so rare. However, he still had a chance because Fong Lee was within his sword domain. He noticed that even an Exalt Realm expert like Fong Lee would still be restrained and suppressed within the sword domain. Moreover, the might carried by those 200 swords had instantly improved by more than 10 times while they were within the sword domain. Coupled with his slaughter sword intent, he still had a chance to break through Fong Lee's mysterious barrier. You've actually comprehended the sword domain. Meanwhile, Fong Lee stared fixedly at Xiangyi, as if she intended to see through him and said, I admit that I've really underestimated you. However, do you think that you can kill me just because you've comprehended the sword domain? How laughable. Perhaps you might have a chance at destroying my spatial barrier if we're able to execute an attack like the one from before. However, you can't now. There isn't much profound energy left within you, right? You? Fong Lee suddenly stopped speaking because she noticed that Xiangyi had suddenly withdrawn a fist-sized and glowing energy stone before starting to absorb the energy within it. After that, she sensed the absolutely abundant energy within the energy stone surge into Xiangyi's body. A top-grade energy stone. You actually possess a top-grade energy stone. Wait, that isn't a top-grade energy stone. It's impossible for one to possess such abundant energy. That's an extreme-grade energy stone. How could you possibly possess such a treasure? Fong Lee gazed at Xiangyi with shock. She'd seen extreme-grade energy stones in the past, and she'd seen it in the possession of the Master of Flower Palace. According to the Master of Flower Palace, the Flower Palace had less than 50 of them. Xiangyi's endless abilities and endless top-rate treasures had truly shocked her. Xiangyi shook his head. This woman is really full of nonsense and keeps asking questions that I would never answer. Xianxia wasn't like others who liked to talk about the origins of their treasures while they had a life and death battle. After he recovered a little profound energy, Xianxia issued a command in his heart, and then the 200 swords instantly executed a ferocious attack against Fong Lee. The spatial barrier shook violently, yet it didn't show any signs of breaking. It's useless. This is a barrier created by folding space, and it's utterly impossible for you to break with your current strength. Fong Lee shot an icy cold gaze at Xianxia while ridicule had appeared on the corners of her mouth again. Is that so? Xianxia laughed coldly, and then he casually made a tossing motion, causing a huge bunch of top-grade strength talismans to shoot forward and enter the sword formation. After that, he flipped his palm and the ancient sheath appeared there before his profound energy surged into it. In an instant, the swords within the sword domain instantly emanated deafening sword howls. The Sword Emperor's ancient sheath. Fong Lee's pupils constricted, and fear had finally appeared in her eyes. The sword domain, ancient sheath, sword intent, top-grade talismans, mysterious profound energy. Fong Lee was truly quite terrified this time, because any sword cultivator would look down proudly upon his peers by just possessing one of these, yet Xianxia had them all. Fong Lee didn't dare continue sitting there and waiting for death to arrive. She was just about to fight desperately, yet Xianxia had suddenly said, "Break!" Along with his voice, the 200 swords suddenly spun, and then a like bang resounded as the 200 swords instantly enveloped Fong Lee beneath their blades. No! Fong Lee's miserable and shrill cry suddenly resounded. Fong Lee was dead. Dead without a doubt because those 200 swords had made her into a porcupine. Xianxia instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Fong Lee like a porcupine. Suddenly, a strong feeling of emptiness came from within him. Xianxia laughed bitterly because this attack had completely exhausted all the profound energy within him, and there wasn't even a drop left. Fortunately, he'd killed Fong Lee. Xianxia felt no excitement or happiness from kill an Exalt Realm expert, and there was only heaviness in his heart. The intense battle from just now allowed him to notice the gap between him and Exalt Realm experts. Firstly, besides that final moment just now, Fong Lee hadn't taken him to be a true opponent at all. She'd been constantly underestimating him, and it was even to the extreme. It could be said that Fong Lee's death wasn't because of his sword domain or the various trump cards he'd revealed. The biggest reason for her death was that she'd underestimated him and hadn't taken him to be a true opponent. This allowed him to have an opportunity to take advantage of, and he could force her into the sword domain and kill her. If she took him seriously and fought with her full strength since the beginning, then the outcome would be impossible to determine. This battle allowed Xianxia to witness how terrifying an Exalt Realm expert was, and he understood that he couldn't hold back or utilize any probing attacks if he faced an Exalt Realm expert in the future. He should utilize all his trump cards as soon as the battle begins. Earlier, if he hadn't utilized the Ancient Sheath and the Strength Talismans to enhance his attacks, then he would probably still be unable to break through her spatial barrier. Xianxia shook his head and said in a low voice, "Looks like I still have to improve my strength as soon as possible." After he witnessed the terrifying strength possessed by the Exalt Realm, he had quite an urgent desire to improve his strength. Xianxia glanced at Fong Lee's corpse before he gestured with his right hand and took her spatial ring in his hand. He scanned its contents and immediately shook his head when he saw them, and he spoke with discontent. A dignified Exalt Realm expert is actually so poor. What a pile of trash. There were around 8,000 energy stones and a pitiable amount of combat technique and treasures there. Moreover, not a single one of them was at the heaven rank. Besides that, the spacious spatial ring had nothing else within it. This made Xianxia wish for nothing more than to chop her corpse into pieces because a dignified Exalt Realm expert was actually so poor. What a joke! Actually, Xianxia hadn't realized that it wasn't Fong Lee who was too poor, and it was he who was too rich. At this moment, the wealth within his tiny vortex was something even the entire Flower Palace was probably unable to compete with. Suddenly, Xianxia seemed to have thought of something, and it caused his eyes to glow. He turned to look at Fong Lee's corpse, but the glow in his eyes instantly faded when he saw her corpse. Moreover, there was even a trace of regret that flashed through them. Because this woman before him was an Exalt Realm expert, and it would be amazing if she could be refined into a sword servant. Even if he couldn't take control of her now, he could store it for later, and he could refine her into a sword servant when he possessed sufficient strength. Unfortunately, he could only give up on this thought, because Fong Lee's body had been transformed into a pile of mush, and he didn't think the sword spirit could recover Fong Lee's body to its original state. Xianxia shook his head with regret. A sword servant at the Exalt Realm is gone just like that. It was impossible for him to not feel regret. However, Xianxia didn't dwell on it. Since it was gone, then it was gone, and it was meaningless to continue thinking about it. Xianxia withdrew an extreme-grade energy stone and was just about to start absorbing the profound energy within it when a voice suddenly resounded from behind him. I never expected that you would actually be able to kill Fong Lee. If I hadn't witnessed it with my own 2 eyes, I would never believe that a spirit realm profounder killed an Exalt Realm expert. Xianxia's heart shook when he heard this, and then he swiftly turned around and saw a beautiful woman wearing a flowery dress of the Flower Palace standing behind him. The woman was around 30 plus and possessed a very beautiful appearance. Of course, this wasn't the main point. The main point was that she was an Exalt Realm expert. It was exactly Feng Xiao. At this moment, Feng Xiao was extremely shocked because she'd witnessed a first-rank Spirit Realm Profounder kill a first-rank Exalt Realm expert. This wasn't just an act of surmounting a level to kill an opponent. Just as she'd said, she would never believe that such an extraordinarily monstrous genius had appeared in the Southern Territory if she hadn't witnessed it herself. "How long have you been here?" asked Xianxia in a heavy voice. It wasn't that he wanted to waste his breath on her, but he didn't even have a drop of profound energy left within his body. He had to strive to obtain time to absorb profound energy. On the other hand, if he were to rely solely on his physical body in a battle against an Exalt Realm expert, then all he could do was suffer a beating. "I've been here since before you killed her." Feng Xiao walked over to Fong Li's side. She shook her head as she gazed at Fong Lee, who'd been transformed into a pile of mush, and then she waved her hand, causing Fong Lee's corpse to instantly sink into the ground. Even though they didn't really get along, all enmity had come to an end along with Fong Lee's death. Xianxia's eyelids twitched when he heard Fong Lee, and then he said, "Since you were here for a long time, then why didn't you save her?" At this moment, besides bewilderment, there was also fear in Xianxia's heart, because if this woman had attacked earlier, then he would have to face 2 Exalt Realm experts at the same time. If that happened, then he could only flee, and he might not even be able to succeed. Feng Xiao shook her head and withdrew something, and then she gazed at Xianxia and said, "Do you recognize this thing?" Xianxia's pupils constricted violently when he saw the thing in Fong Lee's hand, and then a light thump resounded as the extreme-grade energy stone in Xianxia's hand had fallen to the ground. The woman before him had withdrawn a wooden hairpin. The hairpin was very ordinary, and it was just one that had been crafted from ordinary wood. The reason Xianxia lost his composure was that he recognized it. This hairpin was something he'd personally carved for his mother all those years ago. He'd carved 2 at that time, and he'd given one to little Yao while he gave the other to his mother. This hairpin before him was the exact same hairpin he'd given his mother. The scenes of the past appeared within Xianxia's mind as he gazed at the hairpin. "Mother, this is for you. Once I'm older, I'll definitely buy a real hairpin for you, just like the one the madam of the Lu clan uses. Your mother likes this one that you made. I don't like the hairpin that the madam of the Lu clan uses. Big brother, little Yao wants one as well." All right. Big brother will make one for you right away. Just wait. I'll be done in no time." Xianxia's eyes gradually became wet. A short while later, Xianxia calmed the emotions in his heart and raised his head to gaze at Feng Xiao. He said, "Who are you?" Even though she was a member of the Flower Palace, he was sure that she had no ill intent towards him, because she was someone his mother trusted. Otherwise, it was impossible for his mother to hand this hairpin over to her. However, he didn't let his guard down, because it was always better to be safe than sorry. I'm your mother's junior sister. Feng Xiao said. All those years ago, we joined the Flower Palace together and became inner court disciples together. Her natural talent surpassed mine, so she would definitely become an elite disciple. Unfortunately, she met your father when she left the sect to temper herself, and then she doomed now. Why would my mother give that to you? Asked Xianxia. Because I'm the person she trusts the most within the entire Flower Palace. Feng Xiao walked slowly towards to Xianxia. She immediately stopped moving when she saw Xianxia's vigilant expression and said, You should be aware that I hold no ill intent towards you. Otherwise, if I were to have made a move while you fought Fong Lee, then would you have any chance of surviving? You haven't answered my question. Xianxia stared her in the eyes while another extreme-grade energy stone was already in his palm. Around 30% of his profound energy had already recovered during this time that they were talking. Even though he believed what she said, he refused to trust her completely. It should be said that so long as it was someone from the Flower Palace, then he wouldn't truly trust that person. Feng Xiao shook her head when she noticed that vigilance still remained in Xianxia's eyes, and she said, Fine. I can understand why you refuse to trust me. Your mother asked me to pass a message to you. She asked you not to save her. Just take your younger sister along, leave the Southern Territory, and never come back. Unless you attain the Monarch realm, otherwise you're not allowed to avenge her. Otherwise, she will never forgive. Xianxia's grasp on Dragonbone instantly tightened. A short while later, he glanced at Feng Xiao and said, You can leave. Feng Xiao frowned and said, Your mother asked you to take your younger sister along and leave the Southern Territory. Could it be that you even refuse to listen to her? I know you want to rescue your mother, but are you aware of the Flower Palace's resources and reserves? Don't even think that you can shake the Flower Palace just because you can kill an Exalt Realm expert. Not to mention you, even the forces of the entire Sword Sect might not be sufficient to shake the Flower Palace. Don't you think that you're letting your mother down by not cherishing your life like this, even after she sacrificed herself to save both you and your younger sister? When she spoke up to this point, Feng Xiao paused for a moment, and then her voice became gently as she said, Your natural talent is the most monstrous I've even seen. Even if you can't become an extraordinary expert like the Sword Sect's founding ancestor in the future, your natural talent would definitely allow you to become. What's the point of becoming an extraordinary expert like the Sword Sect's founding ancestor at that time? Xianxia interrupted her and said, It would be meaningless even if I become invincible throughout the world at that time, because my mother would be died, right? Firstly, thank you for your concern, but I've made my decision, so you don't have to persuade me. Because of my mother, I'll give you a piece of advice. Stay far away from the Flower Palace because only death awaits you if you return there. What do you mean? Feng Xiao frowned. Xianxia shook his head, and he didn't speak another word. He just turned around and walked away. Right at this moment, Feng Xiao's figure flashed and instantly arrived in front of Xianxia. The profound energy within Xianxia's body surged as he said in a low voice, What? If she attacked, then the situation would be quite bad for him. Because less than 50% of his profound energy had recovered at this moment. However, he wasn't afraid as well. After all, he had 2 sword servants. Your mother instructed me that I can't allow you to return to the Southern Territory, and I can use force if necessary. Feng Xiao spoke in a low voice. I don't want to do that. However, I have no choice if you insist on returning to the Southern Territory. Just give it a try. It wasn't Xianxia who spoke these words but a Nanjing. Xianxia and Feng Xiao looked over towards the source of the voice, and they saw a Nanjing walking slowly towards them with Sky Split in her hand. Moreover, a Nanjing was carrying a human head with her left hand. Feng Xiao's expression changed when she saw this head because it belonged to Feng Dai. A Nanjing walked over to Xianxia's side, disregarded Feng Xiao, and casually tossed the head away while she said, You didn't disappoint me. At this moment, when she saw Xianxia alive, she knew that the Exalt Realm expert who Xianxia chose was probably dead. Xianxia's eyelids twitched as he glanced at the head that rolled off to the side. What exactly did that woman do to infuriate a Nanjing to the point a Nanjing chopped off her head? Yang Yi turned around to glance at Nanjing, and then he shook his head in his heart. Even though he'd expected that she could defeat an Exalt Realm expert, he was still shocked when he saw the head of that Exalt Realm expert. However, he would be disappointed instead if she was unable to kill an Exalt Realm expert. "What do you think?" asked Yang Yi. And Nanjing knew what he was asking her about. She pondered deeply for a moment before she said, "Exalt Realm experts have an advantage that's beyond our reach, and that's their grasp of space. However, besides that, they have no advantage at all when it comes to the utilization of combat techniques or speed. So long as a spirit realm expert can destroy their spatial abilities by force, then it isn't difficult to kill them." And Nanjing spoke in a very calm voice, and it was like Exalt Realm experts were nothing to her. Feng Xiao was extremely shocked when she heard this. She hadn't expected that this woman would have actually killed Feng Dai. Even though Feng Dai's strength was slightly inferior to Fong Lee, Feng Dai was still at the Exalt Realm. Moreover, Nanjing made it sound like Exalt Realm experts weren't anything great. It was better for Yang Yi because he'd always known how terrifying she was. Indeed, besides their ability to utilize space, Exalt Realm experts probably had no other advantage in any other aspect when they were against Nanjing. After all, he'd personally experienced Nanjing's triad mantra, and she hadn't even executed it with her full strength at the time. In short, Nanjing was terrifying, and she couldn't be judged by convention. Actually, Yang Yi hadn't thought about how he was the same as her. Both of them couldn't be judged by convention. Meanwhile, Nanjing suddenly gazed at Feng Xiao, and then her brows raised as she spoke while filled with the intent to do battle. "Shall we fight?" The corners of Yang Ye's mouth twitched when he heard this. Has this woman gotten addicted to killing? On the other hand, Feng Xiao frowned instead. As an Exalt Realm expert, she naturally had pride and dignity of her own. Now, a Spirit Realm profounder was actually challenging her. Is she looking down on me? The profound energy within Feng Xiao's body surged, and she was just about to attack when Yang Yi moved to stand between the two of them. Yang Yi gazed at Feng Xiao and said, "Just go." She was someone his mother trusted in the end, and she didn't have any ill intent towards him. So, he truly didn't want her to die at Nanjing's hands. "You think she can kill me?" Feng Xiao spoke in a low voice. If it wasn't for Yang Yi, she would have already attacked after she was provoked by a Spirit Realm profounder like that. "She really can," Yang Yi said. "You know about the martial god? She's it. That spear in her hand is the legendary Sky Split. Besides that, she possesses 6 intents and the inheritances of 22 martial gods. Do you think it's impossible for her to kill you?" And Nanjing glanced at Yang Yi with displeasure while she said in her heart, "What a meddlesome fellow." However, she didn't speak about fighting again because she'd noticed that there was a certain relationship between Yang Yi and this woman. Feng Zhao's expression changed when she heard Yang Yi. She was naturally aware what the title martial god, and Skysplit was an existence that surpassed Dao artifacts. Besides that, Nanjing possessed 6 intents and the inheritances of 22 martial gods. At this moment, Feng Xiao understood why Feng Dai had perished. Not to mention Feng Dai, under the condition that she was unaware of Nanjing's ability and underestimated her opponent, then even she was very likely to be killed in a battle against Nanjing. The martial god and the sword emperor. In the past, only these two people were capable of surmounting realms of cultivation to do battle. Yet now, both of them are right before me. But haven't the martial god and sword emperor always been fated rivals? Why is the martial god helping Yang Yi? Yang Yi spoke indifferently. "I'll give you one last piece of advice because of my mother. Leave the Southern Territory and the Flower Palace right away. I can't tell you the reason, and it's just a piece of advice. Whether you believe it or not is up to you. If it wasn't for his mother, he would have joined forces with Nanjing, and this woman would definitely die. However, he knew that if he really did that, then his mother would definitely feel guilty once he rescued his mother. Moreover, this woman seemed to have come to pass a message to him, so even his conscience wouldn't allow him to kill her. Even though he acted according to his heart, he still had his limits." Feng Xiao glanced at Yang Yi and Nanjing, and then she fell silent for a while before she said, "I know that you definitely have some sort of other trump card, but Alas. Fine, I don't want to interfere in this matter anymore. Right, the experts of the origin school waiting for you aren't something that the disciples of the Ghost Sect or my Flower Sect can compare to. Even though they only have a single Exalt Realm expert amongst them, he is at the 5th rank of the Exalt Realm. Moreover, he once seized the 1st position during the Ascension rankings. Both of you must absolutely not challenge him to battle. After all, he was once famous for surmounting his rank of cultivation to kill his opponents. Yang Yi unconsciously frowned when he heard Feng Xiao, a 5th rank Exalt Realm expert. That's quite difficult to deal with. Feng Xiao was gone. No one knew if she'd returned to the Flower Palace or gone somewhere else. In Yang Ye's opinion, none of that mattered because he'd given her a warning, and he couldn't do anything if she'd still returned to the Flower Palace. Yang Yi suddenly said, "How much longer do the two of you intend to keep watching for?" After Yang Yi finished speaking, a few breaths of time passed before two black-clothed women suddenly appeared here, and they were none other than Hong and Qing. And Nanjing glanced indifferently as them and remained silent. Obviously, she'd noticed them a long time ago. Hong exclaimed, "How did you notice us?" At this moment, tempestuous waves of shock were surging through their hearts. They'd witnessed the battle between Yang Yi and Feng Xiao from the beginning until the end. They hadn't imagined that Yang Yi would really be able to kill an Exalt Realm expert. Moreover, Yang Yi actually possessed 2 natural treasures and had comprehended sword domain as well. However, this wasn't the end of their shock. Most importantly, Yang Yi had actually noticed their presence. They weren't being conceited, but their ability to conceal their aura was something that even an expert at the 5th rank of the Exalt Realm couldn't detect. But Yang Yi had noticed their presence. Yang Yi was only a 1st rank Spirit Realm profounder. Yang Yi had naturally noticed their presence. After all, there was a white dragon at the Monarch Realm within him. Even though the white dragon couldn't come out and help him, even a mosquito couldn't escape its detection within an area of 5 kilometers around Yang Yi. Of course, this was naturally far from the limits of the white dragon's strength, but it couldn't expose its aura excessively. After all, they were still within the confines of the ancient battlefield. Otherwise, its divine sense could immediately cover half the southern territory. "Did the two of you come back because you needed something?" He didn't have much ill intent towards them, and he was just discontent. The facts proved that he could still kill an Exalt Realm expert even without their help. "We underestimated the two of you," Hong said in a low voice, as expected of the Sword Emperor and Martial God. "You were actually able to kill Exalt Realm experts while at the Spirit Realm. But do the two of you really think you can return to the Southern Territory?" The woman from before left some things out, like besides a formidable 5th rank Exalt Realm expert, there are another 3 peak Spirit Realm experts and over 100 peak King Realm profounders. Even if we disregard them all, just that 5th rank Exalt Realm expert is capable of annihilating all of you. What's the point of telling me all of that? Yang Yi kept his sword and said indifferently, "In any case, the two of you won't lend a hand, right? So, if there's nothing else the two of you need, then please do return. As for our safety, you don't have to trouble yourselves worrying about it." Hong frowned while a wisp of displeasure flashed through her eyes while she said to herself, "This fellow really doesn't know how to read the situation and act accordingly." If she could return, then she would have definitely returned immediately. But if she did that, then she would definitely be punished by the madam of her clan. Otherwise, she wouldn't waste her time here like she was doing right now. Now, she'd even tried to be a little more modest, but this fellow before her still intended to drive them away. Does he really think we really have to stay here and beg him to let us protect him? It isn't that we refuse to help you kill. Meanwhile, Qing, who didn't speak much, spoke in a light voice. It's just that Master said we can't take the initiative to help you unless your life is in danger. Master is very strict, so both Big Sister and dare not disobey her. Otherwise, we'll suffer very strict punishment." Qing and Hong had completely different characters. Hong was quite stubborn and rude, whereas Qing had a completely opposite character. She was quite weak and delicate, and she was even soft-spoken. "I don't need your protection," Yang Yi said. "Just say that it was I who asked the two of you to return. It was naturally a good thing to have the protection of 2 Exalt Realm assassins, but he truly disliked the woman called Hong. Moreover, they refused to assist him, so allowing them to stay would only make both sides feel displeased. But we'll definitely be punished by the madam if we return. Qing's voice carried slight anxiousness. Then help me kill. Yang Yi was delighted. If it was as Qing said, then they would definitely not dare to act in that way. So he could utilize it to negotiate with them. But Qing intended to continue, but she was interrupted by Yang Yi. There are no buts. If you choose to continue following me, then help me kill, and you can leave if you don't. Of course, you can follow me by force, but don't blame me for complaining about the 2 of you to your madam. After all, there's a business relationship between me and your clan. You should have noticed the equipment sets those brothers of mine are using, right? It was your madam who sold them to me. So, my relationship with your madam is very good. Otherwise, she wouldn't ask the 2 of you to come with me, right? Yang Yi slightly admired himself after he finished speaking these words because he was actually able to stay calm and composed as he lied now. The 2 of them believed Yang Yi, and it wasn't just them. Even in Nanjing believed him. It was none other than because if there was no business relationship between the clan and Yang Yi, then how could Anbairu have possibly given Yang Yi so many sets of heaven rank equipment? How could she have dispatched 2 Exalt Realm assassins to follow Yang Yi? But Nanjing wondered exactly what deal Yang Yi had made with Anbairu to make the southern and clan pay such a huge price, even though she was puzzled, and Nanjing had never asked about it. In her opinion, she was merely curious and a little puzzled by it, but it wasn't at the extent of making her interested to find out the answer. The 2 of them fell silent. Truthfully speaking, they were naturally unwilling to obey the orders of a spirit realm profounder. However, this sword emperor who stood before them was one who went to extremes, and he was a decisive and ruthless person. So, if they didn't do as he said, then not to mention complaining about them to Madame N, the slightest conflict might even make him raise his sword against them. If it was in the past, then they would naturally not fear Yang Yi. However, they had no choice but to fear him now. Yang Yi and Nanjing possessed the strength to kill Exalt Realm experts, and there were over 100 assassins in the surroundings. Moreover, their concealment technique was utterly useless before Yang Yi. Their shock increased the more they thought about it because if Yang Yi had the intention to kill them, then it might really be possible if he was willing to pay a certain price. What about this? 10 top-grade energy stones had suddenly appeared in Yang Ye's palm, and he said, I'll give you 10 top-grade energy stones for every single person you kill for me. What do you think? He didn't want to shed all pretenses with them. After all, there was no bitter enmity between them, and if it were possible, it was best if they could cooperate with each other. Really? Their eyes immediately lit up when they saw the top-grade energy stones in Yang Ye's palm. Top-grade energy stones were treasures that were precious even to them. After all, ordinary energy stones were utterly incapable of providing them with sufficient energy at their current realms of cultivation, and only top-grade energy stones and extreme-grade energy stones could satisfy their needs. Yang Yi was delighted when he heard this and said to himself, looks like I have a chance. Yang Yi didn't beat around the bush. He casually tossed over those 10 top-grade energy stones and said, 10 for a King Realm Profounder, 30 for a Spirit Realm Profounder, 50 and 5 top-grade Strider Talismans for an Exalt Realm Profounder. Alright, what did he lack the least right now? It was energy stones and wealth. There were over 30,000 extreme-grade energy stones within the tiny vortex. A single extreme-grade energy stone could be exchanged for 100 top-grade energy stones. In other words, he had over 3 million top-grade energy stones. Qing was about to agree when Hong said, 80 for an Exalt Realm Expert, 150 for an Exalt Realm Expert at the 5th rank or above. I'm not trying to extort you on purpose, but Exalt Realm Experts at the 5th rank or above have an even deeper understanding and grasp of spatial techniques. Moreover, they can execute spatial teleportation for a short distance, so it's very difficult to assassinate them. Yang Yi pondered deeply for a short moment and said, all right, top-grade energy stones were nothing to him, but 2 Exalt Realm Experts were quite important to him instead. As for what she said about not extorting him on purpose, He just acted as if he hadn't heard it. After all, he could at least hire 4 Exalt Realm experts in the Southern Territory with 80 energy stones as the price, but their quality would probably be inferior to these 2. No matter what, all of that was just a trivial matter, and he couldn't be bothered to start bargaining with them. The 2 of them were immediately delighted when they heard Xianxia agree. Even though they were assassins fostered by the clan, they received a fixed amount of cultivation resources every single month, and it wasn't much as well. Just take top-grade energy stones, for example. They merely received just 10 per month, and these 10 were utterly insufficient for them to cultivate with. So, they would usually accept some assignments as well. However, when the rewards of those assignments were compared to the compensation that Xianxia provided, the gap was simply like the gap between the heavens and the earth. Hong hesitated for a moment before she said, "I have some friends as well. If you have sufficient wealth and need them, then I can ask them to come over as well." Xianxia was stunned, and then he felt overjoyed and said, "What are their cultivations like?" "They're all at the Exalt Realm," said Hong. "How many?" "Around 20 plus. All right, bring all of them here." Xianxia wasn't able to maintain his composure anymore. Over 20 Exalt Realm assassins. My God. In the past he didn't believe it when others said that money was all-powerful, but he believed it now. So long as he was wealthy, then was there any expert he couldn't hire? But Hong glanced at Xianxia and was slightly hesitant as if she wanted to say something. Xianxia was stunned, and then he quickly understood what she meant. He immediately said, "See those sets of equipment that my brothers are wearing? You should know how much they are worth, right? Besides that, would your madam work with me if I were poor? So don't worry about money. Just ask them to hurry over here. Right, the 2 of you don't have to go back. I'll give you some top-grade transmission talismans, so you can notify them right away." Xianxia withdrew a few top-grade transmission talismans and tossed them over to the 2 women. Both of them thought for a moment and felt that Xianxia made sense, so they immediately stopped hesitating and utilized the transmission talismans to notify the assassins in Ancient Domain City. "Are you very rich?" Meanwhile, Nanjing, who'd remained silent until now, had suddenly spoken. Xianxia was stunned. He didn't know why she'd asked this question, but he didn't think too much of it and immediately chuckled. "I'm not very rich. It's just all right. Ha ha." And Nanjing pondered deeply for a moment before she said, "My clan has 26 at the Exalt Realm. Amongst them, 4 are at the 3rd rank of the Exalt Realm, 1 is at the 6th rank of the Exalt Realm, and the rest are at the 1st and 2nd rank of the Exalt Realm. If you have sufficient top-grade energy stones—" I do. Xianxia interrupted her and said with slight excitement, "Ask all of them to come over. Right, even if they have no one to kill, I'll give each of them 3 top-grade energy stones per day. You 2 sisters can stop staring at me. Your group will be the same as hers. From today onward, I'll provide all of you with 3 top-grade energy stones per day even if I don't make you kill anymore. Of course, there's a condition to it, and it's that you have to obey my orders during this period. Naturally, these orders will be within the scope of your ability. I won't ask all of you to assassinate Monarch Realm experts. All right?" Hong was the first to agree. "We're really going to get rich this time." And Nanjing nodded to display her agreement, and then she seemed to have thought of something and suddenly said, "Give me 80 top-grade energy stones first." "Why?" Xianxia was puzzled. "I just killed an Exalt Realm expert." Xianxia would naturally not refuse her. He withdrew 100 top-grade energy stones and passed them to her. And Nanjing nodded with satisfaction, and then she withdrew a transmission talisman to notify the expert of her clan. Before this, Nanjing, Qing, and Hong had merely come to help Xianxia within the scope of their ability, and they wouldn't fight with their lives on the line for Xianxia's sake, nor would they take the initiative to help him kill. Because their assignments would be complete once Xianxia returned to the Southern Territory. But now, they were willing to kill their way back to the Southern Territory with Xianxia. At this moment, top-grade energy stones were like rocks to Xianxia, and he had a huge bunch of them. However, they were extremely precious and important to people like Hong and the others. It was truly too enticing and impossible to refuse. Even Nanjing was tempted by it. Could be said that their relationship had transformed into a cooperative relationship. Yang Yi paid and they killed. If they wanted more, then they had to kill more for him. No one had to care about the other's thoughts or mood, and it was just that simple. At this moment, Yang Yi was extremely excited because he had a few dozen Exalt Realm experts on his side. So how could he not feel excited? With these Exalt Realm experts by his side, he was even more confident in his ability to deal with the Flower Palace. We'll go kill that 5th rank Exalt Realm expert right now. Meanwhile, Hong spoke abruptly. In her eyes, that Exalt Realm expert was a pile of top-grade energy stones, and she felt slightly impatient. However, she'd still asked Yang Ye's opinion. After all, Yang Yi was their employer. Yang Yi shook his head and said, "There's no rush for that. We'll make a move. The others have arrived. I intend to annihilate all the members of the Origin School who came here this time." Since the Origin School had acted openly against him, then he naturally intended to annihilate them all, and he didn't care if it was the #1 sect of the Southern Territory. They were already trying to kill him, so why would he even care about all of that? Hong nodded, and then she moved over to the side with Qing. Yang Yi withdrew an extreme-grade energy stone and placed it in his pocket before he sat cross-legged at the side, and then he started to slowly absorb the energy within it. He'd obtained a huge amount of gains during the battle with Fong Li just now, and the greatest gain was that he felt he was about to advance. However, the profound energy within his body was insufficient right now, so it was utterly incapable of providing him the necessary energy to advance. Now, he had to recover his profound energy as soon as possible, and then improve his strength. Only his own strength was true strength, and he naturally understood this principle. And Nanjing's eyes lit up when she noticed the energy fluctuations around Yang Yi. She knew that he was showing signs of advancing, and excitement immediately appeared in her eyes because the stronger he was, the happier she would be. This was the heart of the strong that the martial god possessed. The Flower Palace. Flower Hall. Flower Palace was situated within a mountain valley, and numerous precipitous mountains resided all around the valley. These mountains were covered in all sorts of gorgeous flowers. One could absolutely not underestimate these flowers because the area of a few hundred kilometers around the Flower Palace was enveloped by its sect-guarding grand formation, the Flower Slaughter Formation. Once it was activated, these flowers would become weapons of slaughter. According to rumor, the Flower Slaughter Formation had once annihilated a half-step Saint Realm expert. A few dozen elders and guardians of the Flower Sect stood within the hall, and a beautiful woman in palace clothes sat cross-legged at the seat of the host. The beautiful woman was the master of the Flower Palace, Yu Linglong. Fong Dai and Fong Lee's soul tablets have shattered. I presume that they're dead. Palace Master, please issue the order to annihilate the League of Doom's outposts around our Flower Palace to make a display of our palace's might. A woman spoke in a low voice to Yu Linglong. The League of Doom is really getting more and more arrogant. They actually dared to openly assassinate disciples of our Flower Palace. Do they really think our Flower Palace is afraid of them? Palace Master, please issue the order to annihilate all members of the League of Doom. Otherwise, our Flower Palace will definitely suffer a blow to its reputation, and it would allow others to think that we're afraid of the League of Doom. I think that this matter is quite strange. After all, our Flower Palace and the League of Doom have always existed in harmony, and there have been no conflicts between our forces. Why would they suddenly and brazenly kill 2 of our elders and numerous disciples this time? Don't you think it's quite suspicious? A young woman with a sword hanging on her waist had suddenly spoken. What's suspicious about it? It looks to me like you're afraid of the League of Doom. They are assassins, so they would even kill their own parents for money, let alone the disciples of our Flower Palace. Exactly. Since they killed disciples of our Flower Palace, then it's definitely because someone paid a huge amount of money to hire them. We naturally have to take revenge on the League of Doom, but Jingzhu thinks that we should first find out who exactly hired the League of Doom. Only by dragging out the person pulling the strings would we be able to deal with the root of this problem. Otherwise, it would be useless even if we annihilate the entire League of Doom. The young woman spoke slowly. Everyone here nodded with agreement upon hearing the women with a sword. Even Yu Linglong's gaze had praise in it as she gazed at the woman. as expected of my personal disciple and the #1 choice to become the next master of Flower Palace. At this moment, even the beautiful woman who refuted the woman with the sword had fallen silent as well. Jingzhu, then in your opinion, what should we do right now? It was Yu Linglong who asked this question. The woman called Jingzhu pondered deeply for a moment before she said, our disciples headed to the ancient battlefield to kill Yang Yi, but all of them were annihilated while senior sister Feng Zhao's whereabouts are unknown. I guess that this incident might be related to Yang Yi. Meanwhile, the elder who refuted Jingzhu earlier laughed coldly and said, he's just an ant at the spirit realm. What ability does he have to kill the members of our Flower Palace? What ability does he possess to hire the League of Doom to go against our Flower Palace? Elder Ming, he isn't an ant. He's the first on the Hidden Dragon rankings and the Sword Emperor of this era. Jingzhu spoke indifferently. I don't think that the first on the Hidden Dragon rankings and the person that mysterious ancient sheath acknowledged as its master would be an ant. Besides that, even if he can't hire the League of Doom, this incident is definitely related to him. So, I suggest that we dispatch experts to the ancient battlefield and capture him. At that time, the truth will probably be revealed. It's best if the palace master herself sets out. In this way, unless that existence from the League of Doom is there, he'll definitely be captured with ease. Yu Linglong shook her head and said, let's put this matter aside for now. He's only a spirit realm profounder. No matter how much of a monstrous genius he is, he still can't do much. Presently, we have to gather our entire strength and be constantly prepared to deal with Taoist Zue's attempt to overcome the Heaven Path. As for the League of Doom, dispatch some members to clean up the League of Doom's outposts around our palace to give them a warning. We'll really get even with them once all of this is over. As for Yang Yi, ignore him for now because the members of the Origin School will naturally deal with him. Since the palace master herself had spoken, the others naturally had no objections, and they spoke in unison. Yes, that woman called Jingzhu sighed in her heart, and she felt slightly helpless. She didn't know Yang Yi and had only heard about his deeds. In her opinion, Yang Yi would definitely become a huge enemy for the Flower Palace in the future, so the palace should stop at nothing to eliminate him. Unfortunately, no one in the entire Flower Palace was able to take Yang Yi seriously. Even if Yang Yi was the first on the Hidden Dragon rankings and called the Sword Emperor, they still refused to take him seriously, because Yang Yi was only a spirit realm profounder in the end, and just a single Exalt realm expert would be sufficient to eliminate him with ease. A day later, Yang Yi opened his eyes slowly and let out a light breath of air. A ball of foul energy drifted out slowly from his mouth, and then he casually swept it away with a wave of his hand while a wisp of delight flashed through his eyes. The second rank of the spirit realm. And Nanjing suddenly spoke from the side. Yang Yi nodded while a wisp of a smile couldn't help but form on the corners of his mouth. Even though he'd merely advanced by a single rank of cultivation, he was able to sense that the space within the tiny vortex had become slightly larger. Moreover, the violet-colored profound energy within him had gradually undergone a slight transformation. Even though it was very slight, he'd still sensed it. In short, his gains were pretty good. Suddenly, Yang Yi looked towards the two groups of profounders who stood respectively behind Nanjing and the sisters Qing and Hong. Yang Yi was shocked inwardly when he sensed the auras emanated by them because all these 40-plus profounders were actually Exalt realm experts. Moreover, if he didn't rely on the White Dragon's help, then he would actually be unable to sense the cultivations and auras possessed by a few of them. Yang Yi didn't waste his breath. A pile of top-grade energy stones instantly flew towards them with a wave of his hand, and he said, "This is your compensation for today. I presume all of you are aware of the compensation for each kill. Do you have any objections? Will we really be paid with 150 top-grade energy stones and top-grade talismans for killing experts at the 5th rank of the Exalt realm and above?" A black-clothed figure behind Hong spoke in a deep voice. Even though Hong and Qing were there as guarantors, they still didn't really believe it because such compensation really was quite high. Of course, they were mostly worried that Yang Yi didn't have the funds. Yang Yi knew what they were worried about. He immediately waved his right hand, and then a blank piece of talisman paper appeared in front of him. Yang Yi directly picked up his talisman brush and started crafting. And less than an hour had passed before a top-grade Strider talisman had appeared before their eyes. Their expression changed when they saw the top-grade Strider talisman. They would naturally not take an ordinary talisman seriously, but a top-grade talisman was different. A talisman of such quality even provided them with an extremely obvious increase. Of course, they were shocked that Yang Yi was actually a talisman master, and he was even one who was capable of crafting a top-grade talisman in such a short time. When it came to talismans masters, and especially Earth talisman masters and above, even Exalt realm experts like them had to be respectful when dealing with such talisman masters. Because besides the fact that they might have to ask for talisman from such talisman masters, it was also because such talisman masters were rich, and money was extremely terrifying when it arrived at a certain level. In short, they believed that Yang Yi was sufficiently wealthy because how could a talisman master that was such a monstrous genius lack wealth? When he saw that they had no objections, Yang Yi turned around to gaze at Jade Cloud Mountain Range. It was the final mountain range on the way to the Grand Myriad Mountains, and they would arrive within the territory of the Grand Myriad Mountains once they traversed it. I haven't seen gray and silver in a long time, right? Xiao Lang as well. I wonder how they've developed until now. Yang Yi thought in his heart before his expression turned cold. He said, "Spare no one on Jade Cloud Mountain Range." Over 150 disciples of the Origin School were seated cross-legged within a valley on Jade Cloud Mountain Range, and they were cultivating in silence. The leader of the group was a middle-aged man, Xianxia. He was a 5th-rank Exalt Realm expert, and he'd seized the first position during one of the Ascension rankings in the past. At this moment, Xianxia was rather displeased because a dignified 5th-rank Exalt Realm expert like him had been sent to kill a profounder at the 1st rank of the Spirit Realm. Even if this Spirit Realm profounder had seized the first on the Ascension rankings in the past, was the first on the Hidden Dragon rankings now, and was even the Sword Emperor of the current era, Xianxia was still displeased. Because no matter what, Yang Yi was only a 1st-rank Spirit Realm cultivator in the end. So, it was truly quite a waste talent and ability to dispatch him here. Even though he was displeased, he'd still come here because it was an order the sect master himself had issued. He was ordered to prevent Yang Yi from returning alive to the Southern Territory, no matter the cost. The reason he'd been dispatched was only to make certain that the mission to kill Yang Yi would be successful. Xianxia glanced at the group behind him, and then he hesitated for a moment before he said, "I alone am enough. All of you can go back." The reason he'd brought these disciples along was mainly in order to take precautions against others who might secretly assist Yang Yi, and these disciples could obtain information for him. However, their presence wasn't necessary anymore because this valley was the only path that led to the Grand Myriad Mountains. So, unless Yang Yi was willing to spend at least half a month going around, then Yang Yi would have no choice but to come through here. The disciples behind Xianxia hesitated for a moment, and then they bowed to Xianxia before they turned around and left. They didn't dare to defy his orders. Just 15 minutes after they left, Yang Yi and Nanjing walked slowly over into the valley, and they appeared within Xianxia's field of vision as well. "You're Yang Yi?" Xianxia wasn't surprised, and he asked this question with a very calm voice. It seemed like he'd expected Yang Ye's appearance here. Yang Yi was slightly surprised instead. He suppressed the confusion in his heart and nodded. "Looks like you expected that I would come here. The sect master wouldn't have sent me here if those fellows from the Ghost Sect and Flower Palace could kill you with ease." Xianxia sized Yang Yi up and said, "Not bad. Your cultivation is solid while your sword intent is sharp. As expected of the most outstanding genius in the Sword Dao after the founding ancestor of the Sword Sect. Unfortunately, if you joined my origin school at that time, then the Southern Territory would definitely belong to my origin school is less than 100 years. Xianxia was speaking sincerely because it wasn't just Xianxia who felt that it was regretful. Even the entire origin school and Yuan Tian himself felt that it was slightly regretful. Because if they knew that Yang Yi was such a monstrous genius who could seize the first position on the Hidden Dragon rankings, then they wouldn't have hesitated to stand by Yang Ye's side even if they had to form irreconcilable enmity with the Flower Palace. Unfortunately, not only had they failed to recruit Yang Yi, they'd even become sworn enemies with him. When facing an enemy that possessed such potential, the best method was naturally elimination before the enemy could grow. Xianxia smiled indifferently, and then he said, "You seem to be very confident in your ability to kill me here? Aren't you the same?" Xianxia spoke indifferently. "If I'm not wrong, then all the members of the Ghost Sect and Flower Palace are dead, right? I'm really curious. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be anyone within the Southern Territory who has sent experts to assist you. Oh right. I presume those that have come to help you aren't profounders from the Southern Territory. This little girl by your side isn't a profounder from the Southern Territory, right? Besides that..." Suddenly, Xianxia's expression changed, and then his face gradually turned gloomy. A slight smile appeared on the corners of Xianxia's mouth when he witnessed this scene, and he said, "Looks like you've noticed." A short while later, Xianxia raised his head to gaze at Xianxia. At this moment, there was no indifference and calmness on his face anymore, and there was only gloominess and a trace of ferocity. He said, "Good, very good. All 100+ disciples from my origin school are dead. Looks like your help isn't bad. But I'm very curious, who exactly would actually dare to kill disciples of my origin school? How audacious!" Just a moment ago, he'd received a distress call via transmission talisman from those disciples, and then he swept his divine sense over. Yet he noticed that all of them had been annihilated at the moment that distress call was sent out. The origin school? Is it that great? It was a Nanjing who spoke these words. "It isn't even a 5th rank sect. I really don't know what you're so proud of. Is it really because the ignorant are without fear? Who are you?" Xianxia's gaze descended onto a Nanjing, while his eyes flickered with ghastly killing intent. And Nanjing didn't even spare him a glance. She gazed at Xianxia instead and said, "If you still refuse to give the command to them, then I'll make a move against him." Xianxia rubbed his nose. This woman is truly mad for battle. She even dares to try fighting a 5th rank Exalt Realm Profounder. But why do I feel like fighting him as well? Even though he wanted to, Xianxia didn't choose to do so in the end, because he didn't want to waste time right now. Leave his corpse intact. This fellow in front of him was an Exalt Realm expert, and it would be absolutely superb if he could refine Xianxia into a sword servant. Just thinking about a 5th rank Exalt Realm sword servant made Xianxia feel excited. Xianxia started laughing from extreme rage upon hearing Xianxia. "Leave my corpse intact? What high-sounding sentiments!" Xianxia was just about to attack, yet his expression suddenly changed, and then he didn't hesitate to flash and vanish from the spot. Bang! Xianxia had just left when the ground beneath him had collapsed to reveal an enormous bottomless pit. A middle-aged man was floating above the pit and was looking coldly at Xianxia. This caused Xianxia's expression to change again because it was actually an Exalt Realm expert. At this very moment, an unexpected event occurred again. A black-clothed woman suddenly appeared behind Xianxia, and then a cold glow flashed towards his neck. Another Exalt Realm expert. Xianxia's pupils constricted. The space around him warped with a spin of his palm, and then Xianxia immediately vanished on the spot and appeared around 20 m away. He was just about to heave a sigh of relief when a strand of cold light suddenly flashed again. Xianxia was horrified. He forcefully bent his figure, yet it was still a bit too late, causing his right arm to be instantly sliced off before fresh blood sprayed. Another Exalt Realm expert. At this moment, Xianxia was shocked to the extreme, and he didn't have any intent to continue fighting. His figure flashed as he executed a spatial technique that allowed him to directly flash over 300 m away. He intended to flee. Since Xianxia possesses so many Exalt Realm experts on his side, he has definitely obtained the help of some power. I must take this information back to the sect and allow the sect to take precautions in advance. When he thought up to this point, the profound energy within Xianxia's body surged violently. He was about to tear through space and execute a spatial technique again. However, right at this moment, 3 middle-aged men suddenly appeared in front of him. One of them shook his head and spoke with a gaze filled with disdain. This is the so-called expert who'd once seized the first position in the Southern Territory's Ascension rankings? The 5th rank of the Exalt Realm? You're just trash who can't even compare to a second-rank Exalt Realm Profounder from the Central Territory. As soon as he finished speaking, he slapped his palm forward. The space around Xianxia warped violently before the palm directly passed through space and pressed down onto his chest. Xianxia's eyes instantly opened wide while he crashed down from midair, and his corpse fell into the ground. Qing and Hong grunted coldly when they saw Xianxia perish. After all, they were so close to getting those 150 top-grade energy stones. The two of them glanced coldly at the middle-aged man who killed Xianxia, and then their figures vanished on the spot. Yang Yi recognized the middle-aged man. He was an elder of a Nanjing's clan and Jinyan, and he was a 5th-rank Exalt Realm expert as well. His strength could be said to be in the top 3 amongst all the Exalt Realm Profounders who'd come here this time. Yang Yi didn't say a single unnecessary thing. He just waved his right hand, and then 150 top-grade energy stones flew over towards Jinyan while the others gazed at this scene with envy. And Jinyan immediately revealed a slight smile when he saw Yang Yi act in such a straightforward manner, and his impression of Yang Yi became much better. The others were the same. All of them had come here for the sake of top-grade energy stones. So, it couldn't be any better when Yang Yi was so direct. Because they could work together smoothly. Actually, some of them had aroused selfish motives and had the intention to rob Yang Yi, but it only remained a thought to them. Why? Because there were 2 forces here, and they were utterly unable to join forces and unite as one. So, whichever side that acted against Yang Yi was very likely to incur the revenge of Yang Yi and the other side. Moreover, their future patriarch and Nanjing seemed to have a very good relationship with Yang Yi. So, they naturally didn't dare to disregard Nanjing's opinion. In a similar fashion, Yang Yi seemed to have a good relationship with Madame, and so they were extremely apprehensive because of that. Thus, both sides had no choice but to cooperate with Yang Yi. Actually, Yang Yi had thought of the possibility of being robbed when he allowed them to come over here. However, he'd still allowed it because he really did need assistance. Moreover, while his strength was inferior to them, it didn't mean that he didn't have any trump cards. After all, he still had a sword spirit and the white dragon residing within him. So long as he threw caution to the wind, then it wasn't impossible for him to kill all of them. Fortunately, their cooperation had been pleasant until now, and there had been no unpleasant incidents. Yang Yi walked into the deep pit, glanced at Xianxia's corpse, and then nodded with satisfaction. Jinyan had controlled his strength perfectly, and he'd only shattered Xianxia's internal organs to obliterate Xianxia's vitality, while Xianxia's corpse hadn't suffered any material damage. In other words, it could be crafted into a sword servant. Yang Yi waved his right hand, kept Xianxia's corpse within the ancient sheath, and asked the sword spirit to start preparing the corpse. After that, he leaped out of the deep pit, took a light breath, and then waved his hand. "Come, let's enter the Grand Myriad Mountains," Hong suddenly said from behind him. The Grand Myriad Mountains prohibits the unauthorized entrance of humans. Will probably infuriate the Beast Emperor by entering rashly. They didn't dare underestimate the Grand Myriad Mountains because there was a monarch-rank dark beast residing there. Yang Yi smiled and said, "It's fine, let's head in. I just happen to have something to discuss with the Beast Emperor." As he spoke, Yang Ye's figure flashed towards the distance. Hong and the others hesitated for a moment before they hurriedly followed him. The Sword Sect. At this moment, all the disciples of the Sword Sect were gathered at the enormous training grounds within the sect. Taoist Zue's white-robed figure was standing in midair while facing the wind, and the azure sword was hanging from his waist. The gazes of all the Sword Sect's disciples were on Taoist Zue, and their gazes carried excitement, worry, anxiety, and so on and so forth. Because today was the day when Taoist Zue would try to overcome the Heaven Path. What was the Heaven Path? Actually, even Taoist Zue didn't know exactly what it was. He was merely aware that all Monarch Realm experts who were at the end of their lifespan would choose to try and overcome it. Because a Monarch Realm expert of the past who'd been at the end of his lifespan had immediately stepped foot into the Saint Realm upon overcoming the Heaven Path. No one knew what exactly resided above the Heaven Path because those who knew had either died or vanished. Even the Sword Sect's founding ancestor, the Unfettered One, was the same. If he had any other choice, then even Taoist Zue would be unwilling to attempt the mysterious heaven path, because he wasn't even the slightest bit confident in his ability. However, it couldn't be helped because if he didn't try, then only a natural death would be awaiting him. He'd cultivated throughout his lifetime to attain such a cultivation, so how could he be willing to transform into dust? He had no other choice. At a spot over 30 m away from Taoist Zue, Su Muzha stood there with a solemn expression on his face, and there was worry in the depths of his eyes. If Taoist Zue overcame the heaven path and advanced into the Saint Realm, then the Sword Sect would be matchless throughout the entire southern territory and even the continent. At that time, the Sword Sect would relive its former glory. Conversely, if Taoist Zue failed, then the Sword Sect would be eternally doomed, truly doomed. This time, Taoist Zue's success or failure wasn't just related to Su Muzha but the entire Sword Sect's fate. Taoist Zue suddenly glanced towards the surroundings while standing in midair, and then he laughed coldly. Yuan Tian, you Linglong Ghost King, are all of you that impatient? A wave of fluctuation arose in midair, and then 2 men and a woman appeared on a mountain 3 kilometers away from the Sword Sect's sky peak, and they stood in confrontation with Taoist Zue from afar. Old bastard Zue, your 1,000 years of cultivation weren't easy, so why seek death impatiently right now? After all, you should be aware of the outcome your Sword Sect would face if you died. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man whose bare upper body was covered in black tattoos. The middle-aged man was the sect master of the Ghost Sect. He was called Ghost King, and he was a sworn enemy of the Sword Sect. Taoist Zue laughed coldly and said, "You don't have to trouble yourself with worrying about that. However, I never expected that Fairy Yu and Yuan Tian would actually work together with the Ghost Sect. Both of you should be clearly aware of what sort of place the Ghost Sect is. Not only would cooperating with it stain your reputations, it might even turn against you in the end. Both of you should have thought of that, right?" Taoist Zue, "Don't waste your time." Ghost King chuckled and said, "Even if you have a silver tongue, it's impossible to change the current situation where your Sword Sect is all alone and without support. It's still the same as before. If you fail, then the entire Sword Sect will be annihilated, and not a single disciple of it will survive. Of course, I believe that if you succeed, then you will definitely slaughter our sects to the very end as well. So, everyone's fates are in your hands. Ha. Taoist Zue glanced coldly at Ghost King, and then he gazed at Yuan Tian. The latter smiled lightly and said, "If the Sword Sect agrees to be a vassal of my origin school, then I can let bygones be bygones and resolve the enmity between out sects. Moreover, I can help Brother Zue overcome the heaven path. What do you think?" Ghost King's expression changed when he heard this, and a gloomy expression appeared within his eyes. However, he didn't speak a single word. "How absurd!" Su Muzha said furiously. "Become a vassal of your origin school? Then wouldn't Martial Uncle Zue and I become sinners of the Sword Sect? How could we face the sect masters of the past when we perish in the future? Moreover, how could the disciples of my Sword Sect draw their swords once our sect submits to your origin school? Yuan Tian, what a great plan it is to destroy the foundation of my Sword Sect." Yuan Tian seemed to have expected this, and he smiled and didn't speak further. At this moment, everyone within the Sword Sect had sensed the situation the sect was in right now. They were being jointly sieged by 3 sects, and the disciples of the Sword Sect couldn't help but feel a surge of panic when they thought up to this point. The strengths of every single one of these 3 sects surpassed the Sword Sect, so could the Sword Sect resist their joint forces? The answer was no. It was impossible, so only death awaited them. When they thought about this, many disciples of the Sword Sect started to become restless, but it was quickly suppressed by the higher-ups of the Sword Sect. At this very moment, the Sword Sect could absolutely not allow any mistakes to occur. Taoist Zue seemed to be aware of it as well, so he immediately paid no further attention to Yuan Tian and the others. The 3 of them wouldn't stop him from attempting to overcome the heaven path, because they didn't dare to. If they were to obstruct him now, then they would have to face his practically suicidal revenge, and if he were to fight with all his strength, then he was confident in his ability to kill at least one of them. Yuan Tian and the others were aware of that as well. So they hadn't attacked. At the very least, they wouldn't until Taoist Zue failed to overcome the heaven path. Even if they intended to attack, Taoist Zue still had a backup plan. Because the sect guarding grand formation of the Sword Sect was set up by the Sword Sect's founding ancestor himself. Even though they were unable to bring forth its complete might, it was still sufficient to obstruct the three of them for a period of time. In short, the fate of the Sword Sect still depended on his success or failure. Time passed slowly, and it wasn't long before noon arrived. Taoist Zue slowly opened his eyes in midair. At this moment, he was at his peak state. In other words, he could begin. With a wave of his right hand, the azure sword transformed into an azure glow that shot into the sky. Its glow was like a pillar that shot towards the sky, and it entered the sky in an instant. Right after that, a wave of violent shaking arose in the sky before it seemed like the sky had been split open to reveal an enormous pitch-black rift. Subsequently, a multicolored path slowly extended out from within the pitch-black rift, and it wasn't long before it extended down from the sky and arrived in front of Taoist Zue. Taoist Zue took a deep breath, and then he stepped onto the path under the shocked gazes of everyone in the surroundings. The weather in the sky had immediately changed when he stepped foot on the multicolored path. The sun was still blazing in the sky just moments ago, yet dark clouds had covered the sky in an instant. After that, an almost 3 kilometers long bolt of black lightning tore through the clouds and shot down towards Taoist Zue. The bolt of lightning was extremely terrifying. Everywhere it passed, space was shattered inch by inch to reveal numerous pitch-black spatial tiers. The might of the heavens and the earth that was contained within those rifts caused some comparatively weaker disciples of the Sword Sect to be instantly forced flat on the ground while trembling violently. The disciples of the Sword Sect gazed at the black bolt of lightning with astonishment. If it were to descend onto our Sword Sect, then the entire sect would probably be obliterated into powder in an instant, right? A wisp of a solemn expression flashed through Taoist Zue's eyes as he gazed at the enormous bolt of lightning, and then he swiftly slashed the azure sword towards it. In an instant, a strand of sword chi that was 300 m long and over 100 m wide had tore through the sky and shot violently towards the black bolt of lightning. Bang! An enormous explosion resounded in the sky above the Sword Sect, and then the black bolt of lightning flashed through the sword chi and shot explosively towards Taoist Zue at a speed which wasn't visible to the eye. Taoist Zue's expression changed because he'd underestimated the heaven path in the end. He didn't dare think further as he tightened his grip around azure and swung it swiftly, causing countless strands of sword chi to surge like a tidal wave that enveloped the black bolt of lightning. Bang! 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 A wave of violent explosions resounded in the sky as countless strands of black electricity sprayed towards the surroundings along with Taoist Zue's sword chi and descended towards the ground. Su Mujia's expression changed and was just about to act when Taoist Zue slashed once more with his sword. In an instant, countless rays of light shot out and blasted the sword chi and electricity into nothingness. Deafening cheers immediately erupted from the disciples of the Sword Sect when they witnessed this scene. Even Su Mujia revealed a trace of a smile. Looks like Martial Uncle Zue is still quite confident in his ability to overcome the heaven path. They hadn't noticed that the solemn expression in Taoist Zue's eyes hadn't eased up but grew heavier instead. Because just this initial test allowed him to realize that he'd severely underestimated how terrifying the heaven path was, and his confidence to deal with its following attacks had started to waver. Ghost King's face fell because Taoist Zue's strength had slightly exceeded his expectations. If he's really able to overcome the heaven path, then wouldn't the entire Ghost Sect be annihilated? When he thought up to here, Ghost King was about to act yet was stopped by Yuan Tian. There's no need to be impatient. There are 9 barriers in order to overcome the heaven path, and he has merely passed the first barrier. According to my estimations, he'll be able to survive through 2 barriers at most with the strength he possesses. After that, he'll definitely die if he doesn't possess any other trump cards, said Yuan Tian in an indifferent tone. Ghost King hesitated for a moment, and then he abandoned his intention to act and gazed at Taoist Zue again. Taoist Zue stood on the spot in midair for a moment before he took a step forward, and he traversed 3 kilometers with just this single step. Right at this moment, countless strands of black energy surged out from within the pitch-black rift, and then an enormous black finger that was over 1K wide appeared from within the rift before it descended towards Taoist Zue. At the moment it appeared here, the heavens and the earth had dimmed down while the mountains around Sky Peak had been instantly transformed into level found by the pressure emanated by the enormous finger. Moreover, the ground was still collapsing layer by layer. The smiles on the faces of the Sword Sect's disciples had instantly frozen on the spot when they witnessed this scene, and they stared blankly at the enormous finger. Who exactly does it belong to? Why does it possess such terrifying might? Can our sect's guardian resist it? At this moment, such thoughts couldn't help but arise in their hearts. Su Muzha had an extremely heavy expression on his face as well. If the Sword Sect didn't have a grand formation protecting it, then Sky Peak and all the disciples of the Sword Sect would have probably perished beneath this finger just now. Because even he felt quite horrified by the terrifying might contained within that enormous finger. It was truly too terrifying. At this moment, Yuan Tian and the others had extremely solemn expression as well. The heaven path was a path that they would have to take in the future as well. They hadn't come here entirely for the sake of annihilating the Sword Sect, and they had another reason for coming here today. It was because they wanted to witness how terrifying the heaven path was. Now that they had, their expressions had turned solemn. This attack was very strong, and it was strong to the point they weren't confident in their ability to resist. However, they revealed a mocking expression in an instant because it was Taoist Zue who had to face this attack right now. Taoist Zue's expression had become extremely solemn as well. No matter what, he had to withstand this attack, because if he failed, then he wouldn't be the only one who died, and the thousands upon thousands of disciples of the Sword Sect who were relying on him would die as well. Clang! The azure sword shot into the sky. Disciples of the Sword Sect, heed my call. Lend me your strength. The disciples of the Sword Sect on the ground below didn't dare hesitate at all. They drew their swords under the lead of Su Muzha and the other supreme elders of the Sword Sect, and then a few tens of thousands of swords fused into one and shot violently towards the enormous black finger. Under such circumstances, the members of the Sword Sect naturally didn't dare hold back at all, and they'd utilized all their strength. The might of the united forces of tens of thousands of profounders was naturally not weak, and the enormous sword formed from their swords seemed to even be capable of stabbing a hole in the sky as it shot violently towards the enormous black finger. After that, another dazzling strand of light that was over 1 kilometer wide covered the sky as it shot sword up. Rumble! 2 world-shaking explosions resounded. It was like the sky was about to be blasted into pieces while space trembled violently. Countless strands of sword chi and black energy swept towards the surroundings and descended towards the ground, causing an enormous bottomless and pitch-black hole to immediately appear on the ground. The countless disciples of the Sword Sect revealed a smile once more when their joint forces had destroyed the enormous black finger. As far as they were concerned, this should be success. However, they noticed that Taoist Zue's countenance was pale while numerous cracks had appeared throughout the azure sword. It seemed like the azure sword would shatter at any moment. The heaven path required one to endure 9 attacks in order to traverse it, yet now merely 2 attacks had passed. In other words, there were another 7 attacks, yet he'd practically already utilized all his strength. So, how would he resist the next 7 attacks? All those years ago, the founding ancestor rampaged back and forth through this path. Exactly what sort of strength did he possess? Taoist Zue shook his head and strode forward, and he'd moved another 3 kilometers to arrive high above amidst the clouds. No matter what, he had no way to retreat now, so it was either success or death. The pitch-black rift in the sky expanded slowly, while countless strands of horrifying black energy seeped out from within it. Everywhere the black energy passed, space would actually collapse immediately. However, that same space was swiftly repaired by the laws of the heavens and the earth as well. But that same space would collapse once more as soon as it was repaired, and this cycle continued endlessly. This time, the pitch-black rift didn't launch an attack. It just expanded gradually as if something was about to emerge from within it. When they noticed that it hadn't come to an end yet, The hearts of all the disciples from the Sword Sect on the ground below had constricted. Su Qingshi's beautiful brows knit together from a certain spot within the Sword Sect. She was naturally clearly aware of what sort of situation the Sword Sect would face if Taoist Zue wasn't able to succeed. It wouldn't be going too far to say that the Sword Sect was doomed. Even though her father was a monarch realm expert as well, he was only at the first rank, so he was utterly incapable of going against Yuan Tian and the others. Is the Sword Sect really going to be doomed just like that? Suddenly, the space in front of her warped, and then Su Muzha appeared there. Qingshi used the secret passageway to leave the sect later. Once you escape, then leave the southern territory and never come back. Su Muzha's face had an indescribably desolate expression on it, and his eyes were filled with gloominess. Su Qingshi asked lightly, "Is there really no chance at all?" Su Muzha shook his head and said, "Both your martial uncle and I underestimated the heaven path. Perhaps he would have a chance if he'd attained the peak of the monarch realm, but he's only at the 4th rank of the monarch realm. So, he's unable to go against the terrors of the heaven path even if he relies on the Tao artifact and the strength of our entire sect. The elders and I have already secretly sent away some talented disciples. Qingshi, you leave as well. Don't think about avenging the Sword Sect for the next few hundred years. You just have to carry on the inheritance of the Sword Sect." "I refuse." Su Qingshi spoke in a light voice. "The Sword Sect is in a time of need right now. How could I possibly leave? Moreover, we have the sect guarding grand formation that the founding ancestor left behind all those years ago, so we may not necessarily be unable to resist them." Su Muzha suddenly said, "Does the child belong to Xianxia?" Su Qingshi's expression immediately became slightly unnatural, but she still nodded without the slightest hesitation. Su Muzha sighed lightly and said, "That child's natural talent in the sword Tao is superb, but he has a rather extreme character, and he acts ruthlessly and without any regard for the consequences. Even I don't know if it's a blessing or curse that you're with him. All right, leave now or you might not be able to leave in a while. Don't be stubborn. Do it for the child in your belly." Su Qingshi still shook her head and said, "He said that he would come to the Sword Sect to get me. If I have a place in his heart, then he'll come no matter what. If he doesn't, then what's the point of going to look for him? I received information that he's on his way back to the Southern Territory. However, the Origin School, Ghost Sect, and Flower Palace have dispatched experts to kill him on the way." Su Muzha suddenly said, "The reason I didn't tell you before was because I didn't want you to be swept into the enmity between him and those sects. But at this moment, we have no other choice." Su Qingshi's beautiful brows knit together slightly, but she still shook her head and indicated that she wouldn't leave. "You're only a step away from the Exalt realm. Even though you haven't attained it, your strength isn't any weaker to an ordinary Exalt realm expert. Isn't it better to go help him?" said Su Muzha. "He will return safely to the Southern Territory. They've always underestimated him," said Su Qingshi. Su Muzha shook his head lightly. Presently, he wasn't really interested in Xianxia because it was a moment of life and death for the Sword Sect right now. The Sword Sect had existed in the Southern Territory for 10,000 years. If it were to be obliterated in his hands, then Su Muzha would become a sinner of the sect. So, even if he knew they weren't a match for the Origin School, Ghost Sect, and Flower Palace, he still wanted to fight desperately for it. As for Su Qingshi, he naturally had a way to send her away when there was no other way. Meanwhile, the pitch-black rift in the sky had expanded to the point of becoming over 1 kilometer wide. When looked at from below, it was like an enormous hole had been torn apart in the sky, and boundless horrifying darkness was revealed from within it. Suddenly, a finger that was even more enormous than before gradually emerged from within the pitch-black rift. After half the finger had emerged, another finger followed by its side, and it was slightly shorter than the first finger. It was like a middle finger and ring finger had emerged from the pitch-black rift. After these two fingers appeared, all the mountains besides Sky Peak that had collapsed were pushed further into the ground, and the formidable blast of air that came from the sky made the space there warp. Besides that, the golden protective barrier above Sky Peak had sunk down slightly from this pressure, and it seemed like it would explode at any moment. The disciples of the Sword Sect were astounded when they witnessed this scene. What exactly are those enormous fingers? They are actually so terrifying? Would Ancestor Zue be able to resist it? At this moment, Yuan Tian and the others had extremely solemn expressions on their faces, because even they felt slightly horrified from those two enormous fingers. After all, even they might not be able to resist the energy contained within it. In the past, they had a little confidence in facing the heaven path, but after they witnessed this scene, that trace of hope and confidence had vanished from their hearts. If they were to attempt the heaven path with the current strengths they possessed, then they would be definitely courting death. Perhaps I can give it a try when I attain the peak of the monarch realm. As he stood amidst the clouds and watched those two enormous fingers descend slowly, Taoist Zue slowly tightened his grip on the azure sword, and then the profound energy within him surged out, causing the azure sword to tremble violently and emanated numerous rays of light. Suddenly, the enormous fingers sped up. In the blink of an eye, they'd instantly arrived 300 above Taoist Zue. Taoist Zue's pupils constricted, and then he swiftly swung the sword in his hand. In an instant, almost 10,000 rays of light shot out explosively from the azure sword. At this moment, the rays of light from his sword covered the entire sky, and even the glow of the scorching sun had been blotted out. Bang! An enormous bang resounded as the enormous pitch-black fingers broke through the rays of light, and then they didn't lose momentum at all as they instantly smashed onto Taoist Zue. In an instant, Taoist Zue crashed downward from the clouds. The disciples of the Sword Sect were dumbstruck when they witnessed this scene. He's dead just like that? The guardian of our Sword Sect is dead just like that? At this moment, all the disciples of the Sword Sect seemed as if they'd lost their souls. Their eyes were completely lifeless, and they stared blankly at Taoist Zue who was falling from the sky. After it struck him down with a single blow, the enormous fingers instantly withdrew back into the pitch-black rift, and then the rift closed. In the blink of an eye, the sky had returned to its previous state, and it was like nothing had ever happened. Of course, the multicolored path had dispersed in the air once the rift had closed. He's dead just like that? Su Muzha was slightly stunned as well while he watched Taoist Zue's corpse crash towards ground, and he was dazed for a moment. With Taoist Zue present in the Sword Sect, not even the Origin School dared to act too fearlessly, and even if it suppressed the Sword Sect, it could only do it in secret. Yet now Taoist Zue had perished, so would these sects have anything left to fear? Right when Taoist Zue's corpse was about to fall into the Sword Sect, a strand of light had flashed, and then Taoist Zue's corpse immediately vanished. Ghost King asked in a low voice, "What was that?" He'd seen that ray of light, but it was too swift to the point he couldn't see it clearly. According to rumor, all experts who die while attempting to traverse the heaven path would be taken away by a mysterious expert. That mysterious expert would preserve their souls so that they could reincarnate. I presume that ray of light was that mysterious expert, said Yuan Tian in a low voice. It was that mysterious expert who preserved Taoist Zue's soul just now and had even obstructed the aftershock of those enormous fingers. Otherwise, Taoist Zue's corpse would be in pieces right now while his soul would have dispersed, said Yu Linglong. Ghost King laughed coldly and paid no further attention to this. After all, it was fine to him so long as Taoist Zue was dead. Now, the feud of blood between the Ghost Sect and the Sword Sect could finally be put an end to. The Ghost Sect declares war against the Sword Sect. There's a chance of survival if the Sword Sect surrenders. Otherwise, none shall be spared. The Origin School declares war against the Sword Sect. The Flower Palace declared war against the Sword Sect. Right at the moment the members of the Sword Sect were stunned. 3 voices had suddenly resounded in the air above the Sword Sect, and it caused their expressions to turn ghastly pale. After the 3 of them declared war against the Sword Sect, countless experts from their sects instantly flew swiftly towards the Sword Sect from their respective sections. In less than 4 hours of time, the elite disciples of the 3 sects had converged outside Sky Peak. Su Muzha, will you surrender or will you not? Yuan Tian's voice resounded like a thunderclap by the ears of all the Sword Sect's members.